Welcome to the Gospel of Jesus Christ as written by John the Apostle. This is our third lesson in this particular series, and we're going to be looking at 8 miracles in this lesson. The Gospel of Matthew records 20 miracles. The Gospel of Luke records 21 miracles. The Gospel of John records 7 plus 1, and you'll see why I say that later on. And John says, many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. He doesn't intend his gospel to be a list of everything Jesus did. He says, these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. These are things that Jesus did that teach us faith lessons and help us to understand a little better about how the Christ works in our lives. These miracles are listed as the water turns to wine, the healing of the official's son, the healing at the pool, the feeding the 5,000, the late night walk on the water, healing of the blind man, the raising of Lazarus, and the eighth one, 7 plus 1, is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is a little different than the others. We've already looked at the first miracle in the previous lesson, so we're going to just do a quick review here. The third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. Both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. When they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. No wine becomes a obstacle, a roadblock. Jesus' help is requested. We're going to see this pattern in each of the miracles. A problem, it becomes somewhat insurmountable. Jesus is available and help is requested. In this particular case, Jesus said unto them, fill the water pots with water. Interesting word there, water pots. These are not kitchen utensils. These are pots that are used for washing things. And I just want to freak you out a bit. We would think of them as things like this. Now, the Jews had different types of utensils, and obviously it wasn't these, but I want to get your attention. They filled them to the brim. Jesus said unto them, draw out some water from these water pots and take it to the man in charge of the feast. That is a problem. Bring wash water to the guests. The Jews were pretty fussy about cleanliness at this time and washing the dishes and the eating utensils in their hands, and they would take offense at this. Some of it was poured out and brought to the man in charge of the wedding feast. And again, here's the pattern. There's need, becomes an insurmountable obstacle. Jesus is there. He has asked for help. His solution creates another problem. That's the number 2. There was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. Son is sick. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea to Galilee, he went to him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So the child was sick, now he's dying. It becomes an insurmountable obstacle for this man. But he hears that Jesus is in town. The nobleman said unto him, Sir, come down ere my child die. He requests Jesus to come and heal. They meet each other. This is a good thing. And he gets a chance to talk to Jesus, present the problem to Jesus, and even comes up with the solution for Jesus. Come on down and heal my child. Jesus said unto him, Go thy way. More modern English, go away, go home, head back home. But Jesus is not going to go with him. Jesus will not come as requested. The man had the solution all figured out. Go to Jesus, talk to Jesus, have Jesus come down to the house and heal the child. Jesus said, no, that's not going to work that way. And at this point, it becomes an insurmountable obstacle. Imagine the man going back home, walking down the road where he just possibly ran down, hands in his pockets, feeling somewhat dejected, hoping for the best, but knowing he's going to have to meet his son's mother, his wife, family, and others, and say, I talked to Jesus, but he's not coming. But Jesus did say, Thy son liveth. And this man has got to walk in the faith of what Jesus said, not the faith of what he thinks Jesus should do. Number 3, at the pool called Bethesda were a great multitude of impotent folks, blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. A certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him, he said unto him, Would you like to get healed? That's an interesting question for a man who's been laying there at the hospital waiting for the doctor all of his life. Well, yeah, I'd like to be healed. This man had been sick for a very long duration. That's the problem. The impotent man answered and said, Sir, I have nobody, no man. When the water is troubled, when the water starts to bubble and boil, nobody's there to put me in the pool. But while I'm coming, I'm trying to get down to the water. Somebody always steps in front of me and gets there first. Because you see, I'm crippled. No one there to help, and others are faster. This becomes an insurmountable obstacle that lasts in this man's life for years. Point of discouragement, I would think, but no other solution. But here's the solution. Jesus visits him at the pool. And the thing that the man is expecting is Jesus will stay at the pool with him until the water starts to trouble, starts to shake, starts to roll, and Jesus will grab the man and run with him, drag him down, and throw him in the water, and everything will be fine. But that's not going to happen. Jesus is not sticking around. Jesus is not going to wait for that water. Jesus is not going to carry the man. Jesus is simply going to say, Rise, get up. Come on, get up. You've been laying there for long enough. Get up. And the man's like, Excuse me, I can't get up. Remember the conversation? I'm impotent. I'm crippled. I've tried to get down there. I can't do it. Jesus said, Rise and also pick up that bed. Jesus tells the man to get up. That becomes for him an insurmountable object after meeting Jesus. Like, that's something I can't do. But Jesus said, Rise, take up your bed, and walk. And in the power of the words of Jesus, faith in the words of Christ, this man got up, took his bed, and walked out of there. Was it a challenge for him to start getting up, hands behind his back, give himself that first push? Of course it was. But the obstacle went away. Immediately the man was made whole. He took up his bed and he walked. And the same day was the Sabbath. We'll look at that Sabbath day healing later. But that also becomes a bit of a problem. Number 4, Jesus lifted up his eyes, saw a great company come to him. And he said unto Philip, one of his disciples, Where should we go to get some bread? These folks are hungry. They want to eat. Philip's like, Well, I don't know that that's my job. I'm not sure that I have any ability to handle that request. You want to just talk about it? Well, we got this great need. We've got all these people. They've been here all day. They've listened to the teaching, and now they're hungry. Philip, What do you think? Hop in the car, run down to McDonald's, and grab maybe 3,000 Happy Meals. Can we do that? This is what I call the chasm of insufficiency. And it's in everybody's life. It's what you need and what you got don't match. Well, there is no McDonald's. There is no car and there's no money to buy that many meals. All we have to feed the crowd is a small basket with a young boy's lunch. Tiny lunch, big crowd, no McDonald's. This is what I call the chasm of reality. When a person assesses their circumstances, they look at the circumstances of their life and they realize, I don't have what it takes. Oh, by the way, the crowd got fed with those fish and a couple loaves of bread because they did what Jesus said. And then, when evening was come, his disciples went down to the sea. And the sea rose by reason of a great wind that blew. And of course, the water got stirred up. And these men, who were able fishermen, were familiar with this set of circumstances. And they became concerned because they knew you don't want to be on the Sea of Galilee in a small boat during a big storm. And they rowed and they rowed and they pulled the water with those sticks for about 25 or 30 furlongs. And then they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. Another gospel account gives us a little more detail. They thought it was a spirit, a specter, a ghost, a spook. Well, if you're about ready to drown, your boat's in trouble, and you're on a stormy ocean, a stormy sea, and you see what you think is a spirit walking towards you, what do you think? It's like, here comes death. They were afraid. No, it's here comes Jesus. And he said, do not be afraid. Be not afraid. It is I. They willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. Very interesting miracle we have here. What specifically is Jesus teaching us in this story? Or what specifically was Jesus teaching the men in the boat in this story? I can think of a simple, obvious answer. Your impossible problem gets better with Jesus on board. They were in trouble. Jesus is saying, look, guys, you got a problem here. You're trying your best. Let me in the ship. I can handle this. I can handle anything. You've got to learn to trust me. That's a lesson all of us need to learn, that if Jesus is in our life, things will get better. He's not going to fix it our way. It's not going to be what we're able to comprehend or figure out or invent for Jesus to do. You can pray and you can ask Jesus to do a lot of things, but at some point you're going to have to. Prayer is a two-way conversation. You can talk to him a lot and tell him what you want him to do, but at some point you're going to have to quietly listen to what he wants you to do. It's a two-way conversation. And let Jesus into the boat and take a listen to what he says. It is I. Be not afraid. Now we get to miracle number 6. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from birth. This is not a two-way meeting here. The man's blind. He doesn't see Jesus coming, but Jesus sees him. And it's not that we see Jesus, it's that Jesus sees us. That's important. This man with a problem is about ready to meet a solution. It's good news for the blind man. Jesus spit on the ground, made clay with the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. Jesus comes close to the man and puts dirt in his eyes. I can imagine what the man thought. What's going on here? The people watching thought, okay, we got a problem with this Jesus guy. What is he doing? This seems a bit off the wall to me, and I'm sure to the blind man. And I would have to say it's bad news for the blind man. The good news is he meets Jesus. The bad news is Jesus is going to fix the problem in his way, and the man can't possibly understand this. And you can't possibly understand what Jesus is going to do in your life. Faith, trust, and obey. There was a pool of water nearby, and Jesus didn't want the man to have his eyes burning with mud for long. And so he says, why don't you go wash? You want to get that out of your eyes. You want to get that mud out of there. So go wash. And the man went his way, and he's blind, so I would like to think some people assisted him, helped him to get to the water, helped him to bend down in front of the pool. And I can only imagine what the conversation was like. Well, obviously that didn't work. Jesus wants you to wash it out. He didn't make any new eyeballs for you with those mud balls. And the man washed. It was the washing. And the man washed and came seeing. Everything's fine, everything's good, everything's fixed. No, there's still another problem that another obstacle that Jesus put in this man's life. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. For you see, it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Just like before, it was the Sabbath day when Jesus told the man, pick up your bed and walk out of here. Not supposed to be doing this kind of work on the Sabbath day. And the religious leaders were upset with Jesus. Then again, the Pharisees also asked him, the blind man, how do you receive your sight? And he said, he put clay in my eyes and I washed and look, I could see. You know, I was blind. So the issue is not that he was blind and now he can see. The issue was Jesus did it in an unconventional way that the religious leaders could not approve of. The Jews had already agreed that if any man did confess that Jesus was Christ, that he would be put out of the synagogue. He said, okay, we're going to talk to you about not the miracle, but the man of the miracle. What do you think about this Christ? Now, the man has to make a confession. He has to give a testimony. He has to confess that Jesus is Lord. Who is this man that healed your eyes? Confess Jesus. If thou wilt confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, how vital it is for us to stand up and speak up. He's the bread of life. He's the light of the world. He's the good shepherd. He's the vine. He is the resurrection. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. I am, he said, before Abraham was, I am. And we have to confess Christ in our life. And the man had to confess Christ to the Pharisees, and they kicked him out of that church. Well, that'll happen when you really follow Jesus. Miracle number 7, I say Lazarus has good connections. There was a certain man, he was sick. His name was Lazarus, town of Bethany, and he had sisters, Mary and Martha. Now, it was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. This family knew Jesus quite well. Mary and Martha were very good friends, and they had a brother who was sick. Look at these connections. Mary was really close relationship with Jesus, but that's okay because Mary also has a good relationship with Lazarus' sister. And so Mary, with her connections to Lazarus and her connections to Jesus, decided to do something. Lazarus' sisters sent unto Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. The connection goes all the way down to Lazarus. Jesus loved this man, and this man had connections with his sisters, with Jesus. We don't have to worry about this man. He's got good connections. Jesus assured the family, oh, don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. Jesus heard that. He said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. What a relief when you hear Jesus say, "It's going to be okay." And so they, in the power of that word, took him at his word. Lesson for you here. Jesus realized that Lazarus was sick. That was a problem for Lazarus. But Jesus hints at healing. We get around that problem. Just keep your faith. Jesus delays. Well, Jesus is a busy man. Day one, day two, day three. Lazarus is sick. Lazarus is very sick. Lazarus has a high fever. Lazarus is in a coma. Lazarus is having convulsions. Now we're getting in panic mode. We can't do anything about it. But Jesus said it's going to be okay. Lazarus is dead. Wow. Now, what do you do? Well, don't worry. Jesus arrives in town, but it's several days late. How late? Well, not only is he dead, they've removed him from the home, they've had the funeral, and they've buried him. They've rolled the stone in front of the grave, and they're getting on with their lives. Lazarus is gone. This must have been a very difficult meeting. Martha goes and talks to Jesus. She says, "Lord, Lord, if you had been here, my brother." She's teaching Jesus a lesson. Jesus, don't you know that you've got to show up on the scene? We needed you. We asked for you. We prayed. We did everything. We even believed you. But he died. And the scene becomes out of control. Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her. He groaned. Try to sense the emotion here. Mary, Martha, Lazarus were good friends. They were real close disciples of Jesus. They told their friends, their families, their neighbors, "Hey, we've got this connection with Jesus. I want you to see what Jesus can do." Lazarus is sick, but Jesus said he's going to be healed. Wait for the miracle. When Jesus got involved in this conversation, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and Jesus wept. They say that when the doctor starts to cry, you're in trouble. Jesus is crying. Everybody's crying. Jesus is groaning. Something horrible, they feel. Something horrible must have gone wrong. And when Jesus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." Wow, that changed everything. Out of the grave, the dead man arose. The grave is so final. That takes us to miracle number 8. Those of us who believe in Christ, this is a very similar, very familiar scene. Jesus is on the cross. Jesus is dying. And we don't lose hope when we see that because we know that that's the solution. That's the solution to all of our needs. But then there's the grave. The grave is also a part of this story, for it is from the grave that we have the resurrection. But because we know the story, we take hope. Imagine you don't know the story. Imagine that all you know is there's this death, and then there's a grave. And you have to understand that the grave is, though it feels so permanent, is also a part of the solution. And that's the way it is in our own life. We have to realize that sometimes we go not only through the death, through the horrible circumstance, but we also go to the grave, the the permanence of the end of hope. What does the crucifixion teach us? Paul says, "He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with us also freely give us all things?" The crucifixion teaches us the love of God and that there's nothing God won't do for you. But what does the grave teach us? What does it teach you when your dreams, your visions, your hopes die? And not only are they dead, they're buried. Well, we're crucified with Christ, and then we are buried with him. We go to the grave also, and we share in his death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glorious power of the Father, we also might live a new life. This is the lesson that Jesus is teaching us in the Gospel of John, that we have insurmountable problems that ultimately will lead to an end of a dream, end of a hope, end of a promise. But when Jesus comes on the scene, there is hope. But you got to let him into your boat, and you got to listen to what he has to say. And it may go not only to death, but to the grave. So that what comes out of the grave in your life is the purpose, the plan of God, and not your own. That takes us to the end of this lesson.